going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is $3 Theater. And you know, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I think, is my most anticipated film for the month of December. It really is. I mean, Aquaman is clearly up there. This and Spider-Man are the two I really want to see. But Spider-Man, because of the very interesting visual style and the Miles Morales story and everything else about it looks amazing. Phil Lord and Chris Miller are kind of the main reason why I want to see it. Their involvement on anything that gets completed solo is something I generally like to watch because I kind of know what I'm in for. But they had a screening for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse yesterday, and a bunch of critics got to watch it, and a bunch of critics got to review it. And yeah, it's sitting at 100% right now on Rotten Tomatoes, 100%. 33 out of 33 fresh reviews, and 8.8 out of 10 total, with a general consensus here being Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse matches bold storytelling with striking animation for a purely enjoyable adventure with heart, humor, and plenty of superhero action, which, let's be fair, when it comes to Spider-Man, this is exactly what you want. This is exactly what you need. This is exactly what you want out of this kind of stuff. Why do you think Spider-Man, the video game that came out a couple months ago, did so damn well? Because the whole thing is full of great Spider-Man moments, great characters, great writing, and great heart. There's a lot of heart and love in that Spider-Man game because I think that's at the core of what Spider-Man is as a character. And when you use that, when you exemplify that, when that becomes a big part of it, then ultimately you have a better product. And I think that's one of the things a lot of superhero movies kind of miss is the heart. Why do you think people freaking responded the way they did to Avengers Infinity War? Because they care about the characters. They love those characters. There's heart there. There's a connection. So I think this one should be okay. But let's take a look here at the info, the general synopsis, saying Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the creative minds behind the Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street, bring their unique talents to a fresh version of a different Spider-Man universe. With a groundbreaking visual style that is the first of its kind, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse introduces Brooklyn teen Miles Morales and the limitless possibilities of the Spider-Verse, where more than one can wear the mask. And it looks pretty amazing. They're already talking about spinning off to what's it called? To a Spider-Gwen movie, essentially. Right? They want to have a Spider-Gwen movie, same animation stylings, but bring in more female teams. I talked about that yesterday. That shows you that Amy Pascal understands at least how to utilize the all-female narrative. So we can see how that works. Now, let's take a look here at the top critics, what they have to say about this, because I like to go through in the RT recap and read their synopsises or their conclusions and then analyze them. So first up here is William Bibani from The Wrap saying Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse represents some of the best superhero storytelling on the market. Now, that's not a lot there, but it gives you a grand idea of what you're in for. It really does. It gives you a pretty good idea. Good storytelling is something that oftentimes gets left behind in a lot of superhero movies, right? Like, let's take a look at Black Panther. Black Panther is a good movie, but the storytelling's kind of bland, right? It's kind of a ripoff of Lion King. I don't think that can be argued at this point. You know, certain elements did really well, but ultimately it was kind of a straightforward origin story. Or not an origin story, but a continuation off of Civil War. Whereas Avengers Infinity War was a really good story that really solidified a lot of amazing aspects of everything we'd come to know over the past 10 years from Marvel. They had they had a big role to fill, and they did it. But this one, if it's just good storytelling, a good story, people are going to respond to that, especially if it's kind of, I don't want to say limited in scope, because I know it's meant to kind of talk about the unlimitedness of the Spider-Verse, but it is still going to be very much honed on Miles and Peter's relationship. Now, Jesse Hassinger from AV Club here says, this is the seventh Spider-Man feature film in 16 years, but this universe has rarely felt so fresh. Well, the reason why it rarely felt so fresh is because it's usually sequels, right? If it's the seventh movie in 16 years, how many of those are origins, right? Spider-Man 2002, Amazing Spider-Man 2012, Spider-Man Homecoming isn't even an origin. You could argue that Civil War in 2016 kind of was. But then again, it's always been about Peter Parker, and it's always been about his journey. And this is more than just him. But that could also make or break the story for the general audience, because these people might love Miles Morales, but will the general movie-going audience respond that way? Like I said in a previous video, this movie is only looking to track $30 million in its opening weekend, right? Only $30 million for a Spider-Man movie. That apparently is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Those things don't correlate, which is why the early hype is being built now. Anyway, David Ulrich here from the IndieWire says, the film's wild and contradictory aesthetic elements, which clash against each other like some kind of dissonant cartoon jazz, dazzlingly explodes the outmoded idea that superhero movies have to look a certain way. And I think he's talking about maybe the homogeny of the Marvel films, which, again, because it's set in a persistent timeline, in a persistent universe, Kevin Feige has all of the films all use the same cameras, right? They do change cameras as time goes on, but the productions all use the same equipment, all are shot the same way. They all look the same way. A couple variations here and there in regards to the color palette, depending on what kind of special effect they're going for. But for the most part, there's a homogeny there, and that's the reason. But then you look at DC and the grim, dark version of the DCEU, and that could be what he's more or less referring to. Now, Justin Chain from the LA Times here says, what distinguishes Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in the end is that it takes its mission seriously, even when it's being transparently silly. So that's actually interesting to me, because that takes the concept of whatever they're going for here, whatever this big thing is, and they're putting it towards they're taking the mission seriously, and they're telling a serious story, as well as joking around. And that's what I like about that, is it's like a straightforward line, right, from point A to point B, but it zigzags along the way, but it never loses sight of its focus. That is the markings of a good story. Now, Dan Murrell here, Darren Frenish from Entertainment Weekly says, Spider-Verse has plenty of small delights, and it looks unique. I do believe we can all agree that, I would argue that it definitely looks unique. It just, the way they shot it looks more like a comic book. And I even think some of the visual aesthetics are going to look like it's been printed on a comic book page. This is going to be one to see I don't know if you can see it in IMAX, but it's going to be one to definitely see on 4K UHD TV at home, to look at all the visual details. Todd McCarthy from the Hollywood Reporter here says, a freewheeling, fast and loose, strikingly animated addition to one of the biggest library of films in the Marvel collection. So that says to me that it's just, it takes itself, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it keeps it fast, it keeps it loose, but it's still engaging. And it's just, I think, maybe big in scale and big in scope here. So Matt Goldberg from Collider says, with whip-sharp smart writing and dazzling animation, Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie yet. Well, look, here's the thing with that. I mean, look, this is a kind of a first reaction review. As good as it probably will be, I don't think anything is ever really going to truly compare to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002. That set the bar to new heights. You know what I mean? That set the bar to absolute new heights. This is going to be very good for, and let's say, animated Spider-Man movies, because there's only the one. But there should be more animated movies like this as a way of telling these stories from that perspective, because you can do a lot more and introduce more characters and have more fun with it. And I don't know why we haven't seen more of these films. I'm hoping that this movie does more than 30 million, so then they actually do start to kind of expand out from that. And that, of course, would be the Spider-Gwen movie. Dan Murrell from Screen Junkies here says, this is hands down my favorite animated film of the year so far. It might be my favorite comic book movie of the year. Now, that's a pretty bold claim, because there's been some good animated movies this year. Obviously Incredibles 2 and other movies I can't think of at this moment in time. but obviously this one is, I think, the big one. This is the big holiday animated film. Wreck-It Ralph 2 came out. This is one that I think people have been really excited for, because they've wanted to see the story of Miles Morales told, and now they get to. Now, Fred Topple here from We Live Entertainment says, these filmmakers have the power to make us laugh, the power to cut through any Hollywood formula. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse uses those powers responsibly to push this genre to new depths without ever disrespecting the magnitude of the Spider-Verse. So what that says to me is that this movie takes it, like I said, takes itself seriously, takes the source material seriously, has fun with the characters, but doesn't ever disrespect their core tenets, right? And I'm really wondering if the Peter Parker we see, the Jake Johnson, kind of lazy, tub gut, unshaven Peter Parker, is going to be vindicated. You know what I mean? He's going to get a redemption arc, because it does kind of feel like he's kind of out of it. He's lost, his luster. Because in the trailer, he's like, look, I've done all these things. I've done all this. I've done all that. There's this really horrible, popsicle made in my image and whatnot, comic books, all these things. And he's just kind of bored with it, is what it looks like. And you see, he hasn't shaved and he's kind of fat. What does that say? That's not the Peter Parker we know, but that could be the Peter Parker that we get by the end of the film. Now, Travis Hobson here from Punch Drunk Critic says, call it amazing, spectacular, superior. All the Spidey adjectives apply and still aren't enough. Now that's a good sign, because that just shows you that there's a lot to this film that's really going to play up the core aspects of who Spider-Man is. And I think one of the reasons why Spider-Man has been so prominent and so beloved and everything else in regards to the just comic books and pop culture and entertainment over the span of the last, over half decade he's been around, has everything to do with the type of heart that he puts out there. And I've mentioned that before, it's all about heart. It's all about love. And that's what he's all about. He loves his city. He loves his aunt. He loves Mary Jane. He loves what he does. Miles Morales loves his father. He loves Brooklyn. He loves the city. It's all about love. It's all about saving people that you love and never compromising who you are. And I think that's a big part of this. Tim Gearson here from Screen International says, Sony's animated adventure brings together several well-known iterations of Spider-Man for plenty of clever self-referential riffs and dynamic action sequences. Now, my question, because we see some of those riffs, some of those references in the trailer where they reference the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, so essentially kind of pointing out that this particular Spider-Man is kind of Tobey Maguire, but years down the road, which is fine with me, but still bring out the dynamic action and don't be too self-aware. You know what I mean? Like, be self-aware, but like, don't take yourself too seriously. And based upon what I've seen from the rest of these reviews, that's kind of what's been happening here. Now, finally, Matt Donato from We Got This Covered says, get ready for the Spider-Verse to become your new favorite superhero universe, where porkers can be heroes and Leap of Faith grants you access to one of 2018's most memorable theatrical experiences. And I think ultimately that's kind of the thing here, right? When you look at Spider-Man, and you look at what he's about, you look at what's going on with the character, and you bring it to the big screen, it's all about spectacle, right? It's about telling a good story with good characters, but still maintaining that theatrical experience. And I think that's what they've gone for here, and I think that's what they're going to get here. Based upon these quick little summaries of these people's reviews, I think we're all in for a pretty solid treat with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's entirely possible that any reservations you might have had can go out the window, because it seems that the general majority, well, actually in this case, the overwhelming majority, 33 reviews, all 100% at this point in time, are coming out and saying that this movie is fantastic. Now, granted, this was kind of a hand-selected screening, right? Not as hand-selected as the Aquaman screening from the other day. That was still hidden behind an embargo, so to speak. But this one was more open, from what I'm being told from my friends who live in LA, and that it was kind of open to everybody, and that everyone went in there with whatever expectations they had, and everyone walked out relatively impressed and very happy with the final product. And maybe this is what Sony's gonna do now. It's like, Venom did very well, right? Which releases on home video here in just a couple days, surprisingly. And, but if the animated movies do really well and gross really well, then they could put these out. But here's the deal, though, is putting it out in December up against Mary Poppins and up against Aquaman is a real bad move. It's a real dumb move. They thought maybe that they would be able to capitalize on the void left behind by Star Wars, but it turns out they're not going to. This is a movie that should pull in more than $30 million. And like I said before, and I just want to reiterate, if you guys made it this far, if this movie does fail in the beginning, it will be entirely because it's Miles Morales' story, and it's not Peter Parker, and that's been very prevalent in the marketing. The marketing is obviously being done the way that it's being done in order to grab that particular demographic. And look, I'm not trying to argue that it's at all, but did you happen to notice, though, that there was really no real mention of Miles Morales in those summarizations about him being the standout character? Now, you figure that those would be there, but I think ultimately they're trying to market this to the wide enough audience by trying to say, listen, this is for all fans of Spider-Man, not just specific fans of Spider-Man. So if you are on the fence, maybe give it a shot. Check out a matinee, then, bring your kids back for an evening show. Because these are the kind of comic book movies we want. These maybe experimental types, the types that go and try to tell a really good story, but are still doing it in a way that's going to be a lot of fun for everybody. So I definitely plan on seeing it. I hope you guys plan on seeing it. Leave your comments below. If you wanna call in and give your thoughts, you can always call in to 818-350-3281. That's 818-350-3281. It's our voicemail line. Call in anytime, leave a message anytime, and I'll get to it on the call in. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This has been $3 Theater, and this has also been RT Recap. I will talk to you guys later. Please thumbs up and subscribe. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.